People in the waiting room?
I just started broadcasting. They're coming in now.
Okay.
All right, break a leg, Baker.
We've got people coming in like crazy right now.
Nice. All right.
Love everybody use their names.
When it slows down a little bit, I will get things rolling, which it's kind of starting to do. Not too much, but a little bit.
Yeah, give a little minute to filter in.
And if anybody wants to ask a question live, just raise your hand and I will unmute you. Hey, Darby.
I was just kind of looking to see the little dots next to my name. I don't have raise hand. Alrighty, we're getting ready to get started. All. If you didn't hear Dawn, if you wanted to ask a live question, just raise your hand if you happen to have the hand raise button. If not, this works just good. And Dawn will unmute you so that you can ask our wonderful presenters a question. We have got, or you can ask question in the Q&A or the chat. We'll be watching. I would imagine that Brian and Tammy will be watching as well. Before I introduce them, I would like to do a couple of SWIPTA announcements. There is an election getting ready to happen. We will be sending out election ballots today, so you'll be getting those in your email for the open board positions. And you will have, as a member, you will have one vote per organization. The email will come from Don Marty. So we look forward to voting, tabulation, and see what next year brings. I had a real good thought process on what our counting system was going to look like, but it'll be much better than what we got going on. I had to, sorry. And then next week we have.
I'm slow.
Next week we've got a really fun. What is it? Physically distant, socially connected event that will be cooking with Carmen. Carmen is one of our longtime board members, and she is going to be making poutine. I had yet to Google it to see actually what it is, but the little picture on our website looks like chicken and some fabulous gravy-ish type thing and cheese. I'm not real sure what exactly it is, but it looks really good. So that's Thursday the 19th at 5:30. Our November swag box should be coming out. Sounds like there may be some fun ingredients for cooking with Carmen. I would imagine the wine that she will be having or we will be having or however it's all going to work will be optional. And I think that's all my announcements. Probably Don will get on. Don will chime in if I've missed something. So what I would like to do at this moment is introduce our speakers. We've got Brian Wolf, President and CEO of Parker Technology. And we have got Tammy Baker, who has joined us from a business emergency to present and be part of this wonderful experience. She's the Vice President of Client Experience at Parker Technology, and they're presenting on evolving from nice to have to got to have. It's all you guys.
All right. Thank you, Darby. Thank you, Dawn. Welcome, everyone. Thank you to SWAPTA. Yeah, keep an eye out for the swag boxes coming. I'm pretty sure those are our swag boxes. Those are Parker Technology swag boxes, and you're gonna love them. And they're gonna fit right in with the poutine. Got a few more recipes for you to dial in for the holidays. So without further ado, I'd like to get into our presentation on evolving from nice to have to gotta have. The fact is that we're all in sales in some way, shape, or form. And one of the ways that you ensure survival when you're in sales is that you become indispensable to whoever your customer is or your constituent. And so what we'd like to do is take the next 30 to 45 minutes and roll through some of our thoughts around how to do just that, how to become indispensable. So Darby shared with us, shared a little bit about our backgrounds. So I won't dwell on this. We've been introduced, but I've been in the business world for about 31 years. Tammy's been around the block a few times as well. And so we're going to come at this not necessarily from a Parker Technology perspective. We're going to come at this from a business perspective. And so we'll probably sprinkle in a little bit about Parker, but this isn't going to be about Parker. This is going to be about getting things done and being indispensable for your customers. So just taking a look at the agenda, from our perspective, you got to start by identifying key stress points with your key stakeholders. And then you've got to dig in and investigate root cause to just validate what you're seeing and what you're hearing is actually what's happening. And then you can begin to get into solve mode by creating a roadmap to overcoming the obstacles. And ultimately, it's important along the way to report progress and then find ways to maintain what you found as the solution to the problem. So it's, so that's what we'll do. Tammy, you want to sprinkle anything in there before
No, I'll just cut in when I'll cut in when I see something.
All right. So if those of you were with us last week when we did the T2 show, I liken this to like a Mike and Mike, where we're going to try and keep this thing free flowing to make sure that Tammy has a chance to sprinkle in what is really ultimately the wisdom of the show. So I'm just the straight man. All right. So this first section is really about identifying key stress points, right? And so, you're familiar with the concept of beauty is in the eye of the beholder. And so one of the ways that you become indispensable to your customers is to identify key stress points before they even know that the stress points are happening, right? And so, everybody can think back to like that personal or that perfect employee who seems to be one step ahead of you all the time, where they're listening, they're understanding problems, and then they're finding ways to get ahead of it. Vendors are no different, right? You push to the top those key vendors or those key employees that can find the problem and get ahead of it by solving it before it becomes a full-blown problem. And so that's what we're keying in on.
Yeah, and as a vendor, it's really important with this to have your hands around the data that you have available to you and finding time to mine that data properly. It can be kind of time consuming until you get the right tools in place, but being able to get in and look at the data and see things that maybe the customer hasn't even had a chance to really piece together yet can really be a key point in you being able to bring something to the surface before it becomes too big of an issue. So just prioritizing the right things, and even if you have to devote a little more time to something, finding the way to do that so that it can get you a step ahead.
And yeah, so that's really good. The other thing that I would add is, if you don't hear anything throughout this presentation, also just hear that one of the main themes that we kept coming back to time and time again is it doesn't always have to be about your solution when you're engaging with your stakeholder, right? It could be an opportunity for you to solve a problem that they have that may not even have anything to do with your solution. And then from my perspective, one of the things I've always tried to stress with my customers is I want to be the first call when they have a problem. And then I'll sign up to help them solve it, whether my solution solves it or not. But the key is to get into the flow. Once you've solved a couple of their problems, is to get into the flow and become one of the first calls they make to say, I wonder if Brian or Tammy can solve this problem. And they may not even know exactly what the problem is or if it's a perfect fit, but we at least get the phone call and we have an opportunity to be in their flow of problem solving, if you will.
Yeah, so now I think that 2 or 3 slides down, we might just have to skip the slide because I think we just covered it, but.
Well, yeah, so that's one of the other things that she does is she points out that I'm always getting ahead of myself. So, all right, so let's go to the next slide and see how much of that slide I actually stole. So, so obviously the first step is to identify key stakeholders and to be able to get in front of them, right? But the key is, again, it's not about the pain that your service can provide. It's about the pain that they're having, right? And so what you want to try and do is you want to be less focused on, okay, you know, I've got a hammer in my hand. What's the solution for the hammer? And it's more about, okay, I've got a tool belt and I want to give the customer an opportunity to tell me, or my constituents an opportunity to tell me, if I had an easy button and I could push the easy button, what problem would that solve?
And I think in some of these conversations too, kind of to the point you made a minute ago, is going in and looking at it from just that broad scope and that broad frame of mind, not just walking into a conversation thinking you already know where the answers are, but just keeping your ears open for what the customer really sees and what's really impacting them.
Yeah, good addition. All right, so then the fun part begins, because now that you're armed with the pain, and again, it doesn't have to be a pain that your service is necessarily geared towards, you have a rare opportunity or a unique opportunity to view the problem from the outside. So we all know, you've heard the phrase, you can't see the forest for the trees. A lot of times when you get too close to a problem, it's really hard to get an outside perspective. And so by hearing the pain from your customer, you have an opportunity then perhaps to take a step back and look for opportunities to observe the problem yourself. Maybe even, I'm a big fan of encouraging our folks to be consumers of a service and then being a student of that process so that they can learn the key pieces along the way of that process. And then it gives you an opportunity to also solicit input from others as you sort of walk around the problem.
Yeah, and something that you said a minute ago too, Brian, when you're entering into conversations with people, it's not only your bias or your assumptions that you have to kind of keep in check. You have to also understand that the person you're talking to comes with their own assumptions also. And so when they start to talk to you, they might see, oh yeah, she's the lady with the hammer, where really, I might have a drill and a saw and whatever else that could be helpful in the different things that you're dealing with in your organization. So finding ways to help them see you as with a little more of an open mind, and having those open conversations just about the problems in general. Again, not how can I help you, but what are you experiencing that even if it's not something you think I can help with direct, what are you experiencing in general? And then let's see what we might be able to bring to the table to help prop it up.
Yeah, and then think about how powerful that is. If you're going to a customer and you're asking them about their pain, not necessarily specific to your solution, and then you make observations and have the opportunity to provide feedback to them, which is the next slide. So I'll roll on to the next slide, right? You have an opportunity to provide feedback to them so that you can actually, you've heard the problem, you've compared the problem to what you see, and now there's an opportunity for you to go back and begin to ask them questions, educated questions about what you saw. So as you can see on the slide there, it talks about, we need to be as much in listen mode as we are in talk mode at this point, because we ask pointed questions. We already have our experience. We've heard their pain, and now we have give them an opportunity to keep going and describe the problem even deeper, so that we'd actually jump in and try and help diagnose and solve, which we'll get to in just a second. But the key point is we've got to let them finish their thought. It's powerful to be able to give the person the stage and let them talk through the problem without interrupting them. I know that there have been many, many times where I've caught myself and not allowed myself to finish the sentence for whoever was speaking to me. And what came out of their mouth was actually completely opposite of or completely different from what I expected. And so it's important to be able to use the data, ask questions, and then listen to their responses to keep learning more about the problem that you're trying to solve.
Yeah, and there's the other point of that is, even when you are listening, sometimes you're really listening just to confirm a thought that you already have. So you're really listening for a specific answer, and they could say blue, but you're expecting purple, so you hear purple. I do it even with my kids. I come in at the end of the day, and I know 50% of the time, 75% of the time, my daughter has not fed the dogs yet, and she was supposed to feed them right after school. So I already walk in the door, and if the dogs attack me in a certain manner, I can tell if these dogs are hungry or not. And so when I walk in, I can make assumptions, and I say, why didn't you feed the dogs? And I haven't really even asked a true question. It's more of a statement. And even I don't even hear what she has to say about it, because I've already made my mind up as to what has or hasn't happened. So just making sure that you remove as much of that as possible can help you get nuggets that you would have missed.
Yep. And then this isn't you're talking Pearl, and many of you know this, but I'll remind you that, again, back to being good to have to gotta have. The better listener you are, the more research shows that a halo naturally shows up over your head. People love to talk about themselves, and they love to talk about their problems. And so if you're a good listener, you will already be ascribed a certain level of sainthood. That's probably a little too strong, but you'll elevate in their book just by being a good listener and allowing them to get through their thoughts. So now let's transition into, we've heard the problem, we've observed it, we've gone back and validated and or compared notes. Now the trick is that sometimes the problem that we hear is not really the problem that's happening. And so you can't always assume that the pain that they're having is that there's a direct cause of the pain. You may have to actually do a little bit of investigation around what's the chain of events that's happening that's causing the pain that they're having.
Yeah, this is, I think, one of the most difficult things to kind of dig into, especially depending on how far away or how close you are to really the action and what's happening, based on what your customer is telling you the issue is. We've had examples where when we onboard people, and their main driving point is, I want data, I want notes, I want the CSRs to ask questions, I want to know what's going on in my garage. And then later on, we talk to them, and they're talking about how calls are taking too long, and the lines are too long in the lane. And so all their main concern and all they're seeing is that the lines are long. So in order to get them back into what the root cause is, and to a solution that they're going to be comfortable with, we can't just stop asking those questions and just change the notes, because the customer hasn't agreed to that. So it's around getting them information of, okay, here's the call, here's why it was long, and here's what we can do to fix it. Will that still work for you? And in each case, the customer has said, yes, I would rather the line go fast than it take that long on the call itself. Or there have been a few times where the customer says, no, that information is too critical to something I'm trying to fix. I now understand why the call is going to be a little bit longer. So go ahead and keep asking the questions. And either point, though, the root of what their initial concern was is addressed in one way or another.
Yeah, so it's my turn now to throw the flag on being a slide ahead.
Oh, sorry.
All right, no, that's good. All right, so people remember what you repeat, and so now that we've got the root cause, or we've at least got the pain, and we've got an opportunity to go dig on it a little bit. Now it's time to put our journalistic hat on and figure out the who, what, where, when, why, and how the problem came about to be in the first place. And we found a lot of times, if you literally write a diagram of the problem and what's actually happening and all of the inputs to causing that problem, that you discover that the root cause is 2 or 3 steps back. It's not the most immediate step. And I think Tammy just shared a story about that, where the lines backing up was a direct result of them asking for information, and those two things were in conflict. So our ability to sort of provide feedback and be consultative in that way was a big part of helping them solve the problem.
And with things like that too, it would have been easy to just say, well, I looked in, I could look into it myself, see that, yes, these calls are longer, but their rules are what are causing it. And if I don't address it specifically with the customer and to get down into the specific of why it is longer and what's going on with it, if I just kind of blow it off and let it go, it just festers and nothing happens with it. Whereas when you really dig in, get it identified, and then get everybody on the same page and agreement with it, that's when you can move past it.
Well, and I think, we've talked before in the past about, it could be ultimately the reason they want the notes is because they're trying to catch Joe Smith, who continuously is abusing the system. And so they need that information captured. And that's the ultimate root cause, is they're trying to find one person, or they're trying to find 2 people that are abusing the system. And that's what's leading to all of these requests for information, when there may be a different way to solve the problem.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so now we're gonna drive in or drop into digging for gold, right? I'm sure you're all thinking, okay, how do I do this? What it really starts with setting aside biases, as we talked about before, and really sort of turning on your curiosity to truly understand what the customer's asking for and what they're looking for, what your constituents are asking for. We've talked about this before. You need to ask questions and be active listeners. So shut your mouth off and open your ears. I think we may have covered most of this. I'm looking at my notes. Tammy, help me out here. Is there a big point here?
I mean, it may be kind of similar to some of the things, but to your point, kind of putting different perspectives and examples on it, I think is always helpful. And, I think this comes back to, a prime example that we were talking about once we were putting this slide together was, again, around making some of those assumptions and not really digging in and finding the root. We have had instances where, we had a CSR, perfect employee, great, followed the business rules for the facility well, always did everything great, attitude, and just handled things well, troubleshot well. She does her job perfectly. It's just that all of a sudden there came a time where she started getting into work late on a consistent basis. We could have just simply continued to write her up and said, hey, you're late, you can't be late, these are the consequences, and we're stepping you off. The first couple of times with the warnings, nothing was said back. It was just, yeah, I know I was late, I'm sorry. And since it was a little out of character for her, sometime point we pulled her aside and said, hey, I'm a little worried. What's going on? This isn't like you. Well, come to find out, with all of the e-learning going on and school changes and everything happening within her family, it created some strains around her and her husband's ability to take care of getting everything set up for the kids properly. And she was running into problems with that. She didn't ask us for help because she didn't think that there'd be anything we could do. And we hadn't brought it up to the point because we didn't know she was dealing with it. So once she said what her issue was and the needs she had, we were able to compare that against her schedule and find a schedule that fit our needs still and helped hers with hers. But again, if we didn't take the time to step back and ask, she never would have brought it up. And we could have lost a very good employee, and you know, and it never would have bubbled up. So that same example, while that's an employee example, it still applies to things that happen with customers also.
Yep. And digging and trying to understand and triangulating back. That's good. All right. So now we have an opportunity to sort of get into solve mode here, right? And so how do you begin to create a roadmap to overcoming the obstacles? And so we talked about it before. It's sort of getting rid of some of the obstacles that naturally come with, I already know the answer, or they think they already know the answer, right? So we go back to, so it's our attitude around can do. It's the ability to give ourselves a mindset that's clear of biases, and have an opportunity to think about the problem that needs to be solved with a clear mind, right? And the ability to sort of see the solution without trying to drive your own biases, or maybe even the customer's biases, into the solution before you get to the right point.
Well, and with this too, I think it's an important, the perspective is just everything, you know, no matter what you're dealing with, whether it's a tense situation, an angry call with a customer, no matter the situation, your mindset and your perspective on it is going to help you overcome it or hurt you in that. And just being able to look at something, and when you're looking at an issue, if you just continue to focus on the brick wall that you see that is the issue, there's no way you're going to get the ladder that you need to get over it. So instead of just looking at the problem, pulling everything around and start to see, you know, find the solution. And the first 3, 4, 5, 6 solutions you find may not get you over that wall, but you know, the 7th one is the one that's going to get it for you.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so now this happens to be Tammy's favorite topic, and that is communication links, right? So obviously we know that communication is a lot of times is the key to solving all kinds of problems. But one of the things that we did is we actually elevated communication to a core value at Parker. And we call it excellence in communication, because it's really about choosing the right mode of communication at the right time, with the correct intervals on it. And so what we ask our folks to think about is, so when, you know, think about the situation. So when you're giving praise, then you probably want that spread far and wide, right? But if you're giving negative feedback, maybe that's a one-on-one conversation. It's not broadcast, and certainly not bringing in constituents that don't need to be in the loop. But sometimes if you have to deliver bad news and it's touching key constituents, that, you know, you might have to you might have to broaden the net a little bit, just to make sure that everybody's in the loop. And then if you're giving updates, or you're trying to get into some sort of a routine around communicating back, providing feedback around how it's going, what the progress is, and all of that, then you may have to pick a different mode or a different timing to make sure that people are getting the right information at the right time, and the right way that they can receive it.
Yeah, and I think the updates piece is hard for a lot of different people. We all have many different viewpoints on it, and there are many times where we feel, well, I'm not sending an update right now because I don't have anything different to give. The main thing to maybe weigh against that is the fact that, if, you know, me as a consumer, I can't stand being in the dark. And so while the update I receive may not give me a hope that what I'm dealing with is going to be solved anytime soon, it at least lets me know I've not been forgotten, and that the issue that I'm bringing to the table is as important to the person that's solving it for me as it is me. So being able to be in a position to give those updates and to keep people in the loop with what's going on as much as possible is important, even if you don't have a new bit of information you can give.
Yeah, I think that's key. You know, they can't see what's going on, particularly if the problem is 300 miles away. They can't see that we're churning on the solution. What they hear is silence, and silence to them, and as you've probably heard, in a vacuum, people make up their own story about what's going on. And so the key is to remove that vacuum, and at least if you don't have new information, you can at least tell them that you're still working on it, and that new information is hopefully coming shortly. So that's good. So now we've got the solution, and we've got the lines of communication open. To me, and again, this is Tammy's bailiwick. This is really about making sure that the problem or the solution gets codified so that it becomes routine. And so the key is to be able to put training in place and documentation in place so that people know what the right thing is to do, and they can repeat it over and over again, right? So the key is you want to make the habit, you want to change the habit, but you want to make sure that those behaviors persist. And the way you do that is you codify it and you train to it. And so that's one of the big pieces of what we do on a daily basis.
And even something that seems simple to somebody that's leaving a department, depending on how far away they are from the work actually being done, may impact their ability to see the difficulty in completing something that's being asked. So making sure that even if it's, pick this up from here and put it over here, making sure that everybody really is clear on what's being picked up, where it's being picked up from, and where it should be placed. And also for a group of us, like, I don't do well if I don't know why. You can tell me to pick it up and move it over 50 million times, and if I don't know why, then it's not going to happen consistently because it doesn't cement in my brain. So it's not just about, I want you to say ABC. It's giving the people that need it the depth of knowledge that tells them why is that important, and why does it need to be done, and what happens if it fails, can help seal in all of the pieces that they need to make it a complete puzzle for them to truly
Solve the problem.
solve.
It's about context.
Yeah, to implement it.
Understand. Yeah, it's helping people understand the context for why this particular piece of procedure needs to be run, right?
Yeah, because so might work at home, but not so much at the office.
Well, and I'm not even sure that works at home, does it?
Oh yeah, it does.
Okay, well, all right, you're unique. Congratulations. That's good stuff. All right, so now we get to our next favorite topic is really about reporting on progress. And again, we touched on it a little bit. In a vacuum, people make up stories about what's happening, and so it's as important to report on the solution or report on the progress as it is on the solution, and then to get into a routine as much as possible about keeping the lines of communication open all the time. I can tell you now that one of the challenges that we're having even right now is that the lines of communication that we have with one of our suppliers is not constant. And so our ability to maintain that and report back so that we can build stronger bridges. So we're still working on these things, even the things that we're talking about today, we're still working on these things, trying to solidify these roads, these lines of communication, because then when we really need them, when it's really critical that important information is communicated, we have to sort of rebuild the bridge every time. And it's not perfect, right? Having the opportunity to keep that bridge maintained is just as important as building it in the first place.
Well, and I think a key piece with this too is kind of back to an earlier slide around the maintenance piece of everything. And even, suppliers that you could have had in your organization for 20 years that you have all kinds of good bridges built in many different areas. If you start down a new endeavor with them, you can't always assume just everything that's worked in the past is going to work for this new endeavor also. Just kind of making sure that things are set up so that new people that are involved, or your business or their business has grown so much that what used to go through one area is now going through 4. So keeping that maintenance up from that standpoint is really important also.
Yeah, one of the other things we talked about, and we've already talked about a little bit about keeping people in the loop, even if there's not something substantial to report. We talked about, we think about it in terms of a progress bar. So think about when you're on a website or you're downloading a report and nothing is happening, you're like, okay, this thing is broken, I'm going to refresh it. As opposed to if they put a progress bar up and they show you that you're 50% of the way through there or 60% of the way there, then you know that something is happening. That is the image that to us is in our head around reporting back, reporting progress, and then maintaining the lines of communication so that they know that there's work being done and that we're deliberate about the communication. All right, so then, each one of these slides I keep talking about, these are your favorite things. So this, like I said, this really is your presentation. So Tammy is a big fan of metrics. And so of course, bedrock for reporting progress a lot of times is to have hard data to be able to share. And whether it's hard data that reflects the priority of the solve, or it's metrics that show some hidden value that you were able to uncover, or even more importantly, or could be just as importantly, metrics that show trends so that you can share with the customer or the constituent that, this is the trend, this is the pain you're feeling, this is the trend. I can see it, I can measure it now, and now we have an opportunity to address the metric, which is ultimately the root cause of the pain.
Yeah, and the statement metrics that reflect your priorities, it's, I think it's just a key piece to even just give a little more attention to. And if there's something that's important to you, then it has to be measured in some manner, whether it's just a touch point from you looking at it and saying, oh yeah, that got done this week. And then, kind of combine this in with the communication. So there's a task that needs to be done. I have Angie that's doing this task, and I look over and say, oh yeah, it's getting done. Spot on every week, it's getting done. If she doesn't know that that's something that's important to me, that I'm looking at it, that I see it's being done, then her drive to do it in that same fashion every week may diminish. It may not, but there's a good chance that it will. But if you're going up each week at some point and saying, hey, I asked you to get that done, and I see that, the last 3 weeks you've got it done right on time. I so appreciate that. It really helps me do my job better, or, whatever you can add to that. It's even something as simple as that. It doesn't have to be some fancy chart or report or something up on a wall somewhere. It's just something as simple as you telling somebody, hey, I saw what you did, and it's delivering just what we need, and I appreciate it. That is really a metric also.
Yep, that's good. So for the leaders out there, I might suggest a book. It's called Traction by Gino Wickman, I think is his name. Mm-hmm. So we have 15 metrics that we track the business by every week when we meet, or every 2 weeks when we meet. Sometimes we do better jobs of putting the metrics in than others. So again, we're still a work in process. But the point is that we boiled down the business to 15 key metrics. Obviously, revenue is one, but we've got calls and missed calls and cash and all of these things that all of the leaders in our organization know are important that we track, because to us that they are the key indicators of the health of the business. And so I encourage you to think about it in terms of the problem that you're solving and metrics that can be attributed to that, so that you can again go back and show that you're making progress against the metrics that solve the problem. All right, and then of course, back to sort of this mindset piece of trying to pay attention to the upkeep and care and feeding of the problem that you've solved, so that there's a mindset of continuous improvement, right? We always striving to do better than we did yesterday. And the way we know that is, again, we're tracking metrics, and we know that the key pieces to our business where we're making progress or where we're not making progress, and we have to put it to the side and talk about it, is a key piece to our ability to continuously be a need to have, gotta have, versus just a nice to have from a service perspective. Thoughts?
No, I think I covered these on the last one.
Okay. All right. Very good. So we're rounding the term. We'll get to the summary, right? So in the end, right, the key is to get engaged with your stakeholders, ask them questions, go back and target the key areas and identify the root cause, develop a can-do attitude around and determine how to fix the issues, and then deliberately and routinely measure and update your key stakeholders so that they know that you heard them, that you're working on it, and that you've got a solve in place. So, Tammy, any parting thoughts around the summary, around good to have to gotta have?
Yeah. So, many of the aspects of it maybe aren't always super easy, depending on what you're comfortable with, what you're used to working with. How many different stakeholders are involved can make it pretty complex. But over time, the more you practice, the more comfortable you get in your own skin with some of these steps. And then the more practice you have with those more difficult situations when there are more people involved, you'll learn each time things that ended up working well, and you'll be able to utilize that in the next go around. So it's a continual learning process, and I think Brian alluded to it a little bit ago. Some of these things that we've talked about, we're not, necessarily the best at ourselves yet, but they're on our vision board of things that we know we need to do to keep on growing to that next level. And so, sitting in conversations like this, talking to other people about it, paying attention to how it's working in the business, those are all the things that help us grow into each aspect that we've talked about.
Yeah, trying to get better every day. Okay, Darby, I'm sure the questions are rolling in like they have with all of the other presentations that we've done.
That is what I'm getting ready to do. I'm going to ask a question, but I'm also going to open it up to questions. So you can do chat or the Q&A or raise your hand. Don will unmute you. I think it was pretty thorough coverage on can do. So a question that I would have is, how do you determine how to fix the issue when there's an issue that you may or may not know is an actual issue? Kind of like the example that you gave with your employee. Just because when I was listening, my first thought would have been like, what's going on? Why can't you get to work on time? That would have been my first question. But I'm pretty good at those uncomfortable conversations.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, or follow up, how do you have those questions where you don't put somebody on the offense? Because for example, the same thing, I may go, hey, nice to see you coming in when you should have been here 20 minutes ago. Isn't probably not something I would do, but at the same time, you know what I mean? There's a stressor there, and you don't want to add to the stressor.
Yeah. That is a
kind of identifying also an environment with where you would have to kind of go, what kind of environment have we created in a work culture that would prevent somebody from saying something versus taking a write up or something like that, versus going, hey, this whole thing, life is just upside down for everybody right now. I've got kids, I got this. So there you go. I hammered you with a good 3 or 4 things.
I know. I'm like, wait a minute, I got to write these down so I can make sure I circle back to all of them. So you did it. You did a great job with each of those. So first of all, approaching the subject as much as you can. Obviously, you don't want to make things up. So you don't want to say things that are not accurate. But as much as you can, say it from the positive versus the negative. So, hey, you're usually, you're here. You're usually one of my, the people I can count on. You're always to work on time. And all of a sudden, you've been late here lately. Is there something going on that is that I can help with, or, what's happening here? So you're not just beating them up for being late. You're saying, hey, I have this bar set up here for you, and you're always achieving it. So you're not now, so I can tell something's going on. I'm not just beating you up for the fact that you were late. So any way that you can spin the positive piece of what the expectation is and what the person usually does and how it's different now can help make that conversation a little more smooth and put the person less on the defensive for it. And then around culture, it can be really tricky because part of your culture can be, and something that we have to be careful of, we really have a team can-do kind of attitude around our culture and what we're delivering. And if you don't specifically open a door for a certain employee that doesn't want to complain, that doesn't want to cause a problem, that already sees that the CSR staffing schedule is really difficult to maintain sometimes because of some of the call offs and different things that can happen and erratic call volumes, and so that employee could be wanting to protect you and not cause stress to you as their manager, um, because they feel that they have a certain duty to uphold. So that culture that you build that really brings a lot of good things can also, with a certain type of employee, can create stress on them that they would shoulder themselves instead of bringing forward. So kind of being able to weed that out and ask those questions and kind of clarify that is important.
Yeah, and I think being sensitive to that, I'll just second that and say that, the other part of our culture, at least what we're trying to drive, is transparency. And even for those of you that are the Brene Brown fans, she talks about a crappy first draft. And so Tammy and I can be pretty direct with each other, but I realize that if I drop down into the organization or into her organization, I probably can't be as direct as I am with her. And she knows that as I'm direct, she's listening for the content and not necessarily the delivery. And I'm bad at that, right? I need to slow down. I need to check myself. I need to make sure I need to think critically about who it is I'm talking to and make sure that I'm careful with my words, because sometimes I tend to get crappy first drafts out there that aren't always received the way that I delivered them, for sure.
Well, and that is important too, because I mean, Brian and I have worked together for almost, on and off, 10 years or something. So we know each other pretty well. And there are still times where I'm sure he's caught off guard by my direct input and mine with his also. But I can tell you that every time I've started a conversation with, all right, I don't know exactly how to say this, so I'm just going to have my crappy first draft. And as long as I start it with that, that helps him hear from what I'm trying to do, and again helps bring defenses down and kind of gives you a little more grace.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know if you're all watching the chat, but we're getting some good vibe on the swag boxes. So you all make sure you're signed up, because it's good stuff.
That's a fact. I got an email during the middle of this, because you can see the little thingy pop up from somebody that said, wow, that swag box was fabulous. I haven't gotten mine yet, so I'm very excited to get it here pretty quick.
Yeah, that's great. Well, that's all Heidi Barker and Taylor Shook in our demand creation side. They were the brain children behind the swag box, so they did a great job.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Because if not, I can circle one back, get us a little bit. Can you talk a little bit about my favorite? Because I too had to write down. I was like, it's interesting. Listen to the content versus the delivery, because I too can deliver it a little bit harshly or a little bit funkier in 67 different directions.
Yeah.
If you have not established the rapport to be able to listen to content versus delivery, once somebody is only hearing delivery, how do you then get it or flip it to a transition to hearing delivery?
Well, I would say, the second piece is you have to pay attention with your eyes about how it lands. And if obviously if it's via email, you're trying not to do these kinds of things via email. It's picking the right medium. And it's being sensitive to how it landed, so that you can ultimately address and go back and, like Tammy said, just declare that it's content that I'm asking you to hear and not necessarily the delivery. That's not perfect, but it is about being able to react in real time and maybe setting up a conversation so that you're communicating in a medium that gives you the opportunity. If you're going to deliver bad news, or if you're delivering critical news, then you have an opportunity to recover.
Well, and if you feel a particular way about communication with a particular person, there's a good chance that they probably feel something too. So, just taking a moment to settle in with them, and if you know them well, you can address it one way. If you don't know them as well, you might have to go around it a little bit differently. But you can even start out as, hey, I've been working on some of my communication styles, and some feedback I received is that I can be a little direct. Um, I know you and I don't know each other really well, so I'd really like your input on how I communicate with you, and how does it come off to you? How do you receive it? Are there things that I could do to make it better if there are problems? And at least with an opening like that, that either gives them the opportunity to say, yeah, you smack me upside the head with every email you send, and you can dig into it. Or they'll say, well, I don't know what you're talking about. Everything seems fine. And then maybe you're seeing something that really isn't there. But it's just a way to, again, you just don't shove things aside. If you're feeling something, there's something there that you need to dig into.
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you. Do we have any other questions for our wonderful speakers, other than that they did a fabulous job on the boxes?
If
Well,
you
you
remember
did a
nothing else, you like the boxes.
Yeah.
That is a win for us for sure.
Well, you did a fabulous job on this presentation because that was some good advice. I can tell you. Good
Appreciate
advice.
that. Excellent.
That's a fact.
Yeah, I could have used this a while ago.
It's a good
Always an
reminder to
opportunity.
kind of move forward with it.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Hopefully you walk away with a couple of pearls, and if there's something more that we can do to help, actually, I don't see Heidi admonishing me to get to the contact page, but I'll do that now too. So if there's something that we can do to help you one-off, by all means, reach out to either one of us anytime. We want to be the first call. I want to be the first call every time.
That's great.
That's awesome.
Okay, everyone, we will post this webinar on our website. You can find that there later today. And Darby, any parting words?
No, thank you. It's great information. I appreciate this type of content, and I also enjoy reading your Parking Today blog or whatever every time.
Oh,
I was
good.
like, oh, there's Brian Wolf, and then I go through and read it and usually get some good information. So no, thank you for your time, Tammy. Thank you for interrupting your busyness in
Yeah.
your world today to join us and help your wonderful leader out. And we look forward to seeing everybody with Cooking with Carmen.
Yeah,
Thanks so much, guys.
that's great. Thank you all, and stay safe. Be safe out there, and can't wait to see you all in the flesh. That's what we really want, right? This virtual stuff was fun for 9 months. Enough. Real.
Absolutely.
All right. Bye-bye, guys.
Thank you.